Hey guys, it's Shelby, otherwise known as Shelbizleee here on YouTube, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about recycling. So you know on this channel we talk about eco-friendly living, how you can live a more sustainable lifestyle, and most of the time I'm here talking to you about reusables, or ways to create no waste, which includes recycling. And that's because recycling is not the most environmentally friendly option. It's actually the very last resort before the landfill. It's not something I typically would recommend you do more of. I actually want you to do a lot less of it so you can avoid materials to begin with. But as someone who grew up in small town Texas, I know that is not always possible. Recycling isn't even always possible. But before we get into it, I wanted to ask you guys a question and let me know in the comments, whose responsibility do you think it is to come up with sort of a recycling program for materials that are being created? Does that make sense? So you have this random thing, like we talked about Tetra Paks before. Do you think it's the responsibility of the person creating the product to package that product in something that is already recyclable? Or do you think it's recyclers' responsibility? People who come up with recycling systems to come up with a way to recycle those products, right? So is it the recycler's responsibility to come up with a way to recycle Tetra Paks? Or is it the people's responsibility who package their stuff in a non-recyclable package to package their stuff in a recyclable package? Does that make sense? I'm really curious what you think, because I thought about it and I don't really know whose responsibility it should be. Obviously, I sit here and I complain that there are items that are made that are not recyclable, but is it their job to create something in recyclable packaging, or is it kind of other people's job to come up with a solution to that? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. I'm kind of on the fence about it, but let me know what you think in the comments down below, and let's go ahead and get into 10 things that are not recyclable. First thing is plastic bottle caps. But it could literally be the plastic bottle that you end up putting in your recycling that isn't recyclable if you do it wrong. Typical plastic bottles that you buy, if you're buying water, if you're buying soda, or whatever it is that you're buying in a plastic bottle, that bottle is typically plastic number 1. Now this is something to keep in mind, that the lower the number is, the more likely it is to be recycled, and as that number gets higher, the less likely it is to get recycled. So most plastic bottles are made of recycled plastic number 1, which is recycled most universally. However, the lids of those bottles are not made from plastic number 1. I'm not sure which number plastic they are, but I know that they are a different plastic than what the bottle is made from, which is actually the exact reason that those caps are not recyclable with that bottle. You have to separate the lid from the bottle to recycle them separately, and not all curbside recyclers take those lids to begin with. So keep that in mind from now on. Whenever you are recycling a plastic bottle, you need to attach the lid. You can put it in your recycling, but that's kind of iffy. I recommend you do your research, because if you put something in your recycling bin that isn't recyclable, it can actually decrease the likelihood of all of your recyclables getting recycled in the first place. So be very careful about that, and let's move on to number 2. Pizza boxes. And I'm sure you're like, wait, but isn't cardboard recyclable? Yes, but not when it's been soiled by food grease, or something like that. Basically, to recycle an item, what they do is separate the materials back into their virgin forms, right? So same thing with plastic number 1 that we just talked about. You have to break down all the plastic number 1s into smaller particles so that those smaller particles can be remade back into something else. Same goes for the cardboard. If the cardboard cannot be separated from the oil of the pizza grease, then they can't turn that cardboard box back into another one. And that's essentially it. The cardboard can't be made back into its virgin form to be turned back into a pizza box, so the pizza boxes that are soiled with grease are not recyclable. They are, however, compostable, so if maybe the bottom has grease on it and the top does not, you can recycle the top, compost the bottom. That's what we do around here, and that's a great tip for you as well. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3 is coffee filters, for the exact same reason. Yes, they're paper, but they've been soiled with food waste and therefore cannot be separated to be made back into their virgin form to be turned back into something else. So don't put these things in your recycling, because like I said, it can decrease the likelihood that your recycling even gets recycled in the first place. Number 4 is medication bottles. So this is a little weird because it is plastic. It is a type of plastic that can be recycled, but a lot of curbsides don't take them because of the pigment inside. So you can't mix a green bottle with a clear bottle with an orange bottle. You're going to get some weird color. Basically, all those things would have to be separated out into their own thing to be made back into something else. And because of that pigment, a lot of curbsides won't take your medical bottles, your little pill bottles, and things like that. I think that's something a lot of people don't know, but I wanted to let you guys know about that. But there are a ton of bring back programs, like you can bring your bottles back to your pharmacy a lot of times and they will reuse them. There's another organization, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I'll put it on the screen here and I'll link their information below, where you can ship back your bottles and they will reuse them. So that's a great option as well, but probably most likely your curbside does not accept those little orange bottles. Number 5 is plastic utensils. And yeah, this is very frustrating and I think a lot of people don't know this. Any of those little plastic pieces like plastic straws, plastic utensils, smaller particles of plastic are really hard to be recycled because they get caught up in the machine and they can't turn them into those little virgin pieces that we talked about in the beginning. Places like Whole Foods even put images of their plastic utensils on their recycling sign and say that they are recyclable, but chances are they're not and they're going to get thrown out. And again, they can even ruin the chances of the entire batch of recyclables being able to be recycled because it's contaminated with things that they can't recycle. So it's best to avoid plastic utensils at all costs. That's why I carry my own little utensil roll, and you guys should too. They're easily avoidable, so just get yourself a little bamboo spork or whatever it is, carry it around with you, and avoid plastic utensils at all costs. Number 6 is plastic bags. You know, I've had so many people give me the excuse, well, yeah, I use plastic bags, but I recycle them. Again, because that plastic is so thin, it gets caught in the machinery. It's very, very difficult to recycle plastic like that. I don't know if everybody knows that, but yeah, plastic bags are just essentially not recyclable. They end up in our oceans, they end up in our landfills, they end up in our creeks and our ditches, and they end up everywhere, stuck in trees. I mean, it's never ending. So please, it is so easy, and in a lot of places can save you money to bring your own grocery bags. Please stop using single-use plastic bags. They are so horrible and so pointless that they're one of my pet peeves. But yeah, plastic bags most of the time cannot be recycled at all. Number 7 is styrofoam, which oddly enough is also a plastic number 6 most of the time. The thing about styrofoam is it's actually 90% air. There's not a lot of materials there to be broken down and made back into the virgin styrofoam plastic material. If you've ever seen or used styrofoam, you probably also know that it is very, very porous because it has a lot of air in it, but that also means it has a very high likelihood of being contaminated with food. And as we've already talked about, if you can't separate the material from the food, it can't be recycled. So because of that, and because it breaks down into such small little pieces so easily and so quickly, styrofoam is one of those things that just really doesn't have a recycling program. And even when I was in college, I went to, what university was it? I think it's Texas Tech out in Lubbock, and they have a styrofoam recycling system where they basically are turning their styrofoam into styrofoam blocks, but there's no one to buy the styrofoam blocks. So they're technically recycling the styrofoam, but if there's not a market for someone to buy it, it doesn't matter. It ends up as waste anyway. And that's definitely not a widely known or produced thing, styrofoam recycling. So I went ahead and put that one in here too. Number 8 is bioplastics, or if you've ever seen a plastic that says it is compostable or biodegradable, you have to put it in a compost for it to be repurposed. It cannot be recycled. And that's because those plastics are not made from oil or petroleum. They're made from bio-based products like corn or wheat, all sorts of things that they're doing with bioplastics now. But do not ever put one of your cups that says it is compostable in the recycling, because it's just going to end up in the landfill. Make sure you're taking care of those bioplastics and putting them in industrial recycling, industrial composting, if that's what they're meant to be put in, but don't put them in the recycling because they're just gonna get thrown away. Number 9 is glass, but not just any glass, because you guys know I love glass. Love glass jars, love reusing them. They're great for recycling, but if you break them, they're not. And that's just simply because it's so dangerous to the people who have to do the sorting and the people who have to do the melting and down of the glass and all this and that. Basically, once your glass is broken, it's no longer recyclable. If someone sees it in a recycling bin, for instance, if I put a broken piece of plastic in my recycling bin and then the people who are picking up the recycling see that it's broken, if they get a certain amount of glass, like if there's too much broken glass for the overall truck, that whole truck will not be able to be recycled. This is called the acceptable contamination rate. I learned about this in college. Basically, if your truck is too contaminated, they just won't touch it. They won't recycle it. If it's too dangerous, if it's too likely to be contaminated, they just send it all to landfill. And it's very heartbreaking. So it's very important to know what is and is not recyclable. Broken glass, unfortunately, is not. And number 10 is aluminum laminates. This is things like Capri Suns, wine pouches, face mask packages, anything that combines aluminum with plastics. And that's because you have to separate those two materials, like we talked about, back into their virgin form to recycle them. So you'd have to melt off the plastic and take it somehow, which plastic turns back into oil because plastic is from oil. So you'd have to turn that plastic back into oil and separate it from the aluminum and have virgin aluminum to recycle either of those things. So it's not a thing that is widely recycled. Actually, it's very, very, very rare that plastic aluminum laminates will get recycled. However, there is a company that has a startup called Vial. Well, I don't know if you consider them a startup. Basically, I spoke to the owner of Vial a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and we talked about how the idea started back when he was doing his PhD in college and how he turned it into a business idea and all the complications along with trying to create a new form of recycling for products that are so massive right now, with like kids using those type of pouches to squeeze food into. I'm sure you've seen what I'm talking about. I'll put one right here. But yeah, it was super interesting to talk about him. He has a very different perspective on recycling and like zero waste and stuff like that. So it was super cool to speak with him, and I'm going to link that conversation with him on the podcast in the description box. If you haven't checked out my podcast by now, make sure you do it. It is in combination with a platform known as Ubuntu, and I'm just talking to a lot of really cool business creators, business-minded people who are trying to find innovative solutions to our very detrimental environmental issues. So make sure you check out the podcast. And really quickly, I wanted to do one of my shout outs for you guys. So let me go to my Instagram really quickly. This week's shout out goes to, it says the Dreadhead Mermaid. I think her name might be Katon. I'm not completely sure, but she knows who she is because she tagged me. So she purchased one of the desks I talked about not too long ago in my minimalist desk tour. But what's really cool is she's repurposing it, not just using it as a desk. She's also using it as like a kitchen table and an island in her kitchen. So she cooks on it. She has dinner on it. It's so multi-purpose that she's been loving it, and she tagged me in it, and she said it's been going so great for her, which makes me so happy when you guys find out about things that make your life easier or better or more eco-friendly. So whatever you're doing in your life, whatever sustainable action you're making, make sure you're tagging me in it on Instagram, and you can be my next shout out of the week. I'm also sending her one of my new compostable stickers. So if you're my shout out of the week, you will also receive one of my compostable stickers as well. So make sure you're following me on Instagram. And remember, until next time, you cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that you can do. Bye, guys.
For example, if you had a truck carrying juice in plastic bottles, that truck has around 60% of juice and 40% of packaging. If you have exactly the same truck, but transporting that same juice in pouches, that truck is transporting 95% of product and 5% of packaging. What really annoys me is that we forget sometimes that perspective and we concentrate only in the recyclability side of things.